The zipper stuck halfway. I pulled harder, and the leather gym bag opened with a soft hiss, releasing the smell of vinyl and something metallic underneath. Inside, folded neatly between workout clothes and a water bottle, was a manila folder. I lifted it out. The label on the tab was printed in our hospital standard font. Mitchell, Elizabeth, Dobb, March 15, 1989, MRN, 847,362. My patient's file, the one she'd said was missing. The one she'd been terrified someone had taken from the records room. But it wasn't just the file that made my hand start shaking. It was what was clipped to the inside cover page after page of her medical history, annotated in red ink with notes I'd never written, notes about medications I'd never prescribed, notes that said things like, increased dose if she resists and memory issues, expected keep her confused, and at the bottom of the last page, in handwriting I didn't recognize, she can't be allowed to remember what happened. I looked up. Her husband was standing in the doorway, watching me, and he was smiling. 3 days earlier, I'd been finishing my morning rounds on the internal medicine floor when my pager went off. The message was brief. New patient in exam room 4. Possible medication reconciliation issue. Dr. Patel, I was 6 months into my second year of residency at St. Halsted, and medication reconciliation issues were common patients on 10 different prescriptions from 5 different doctors. Nobody quite sure what they were actually taking or why. Usually straightforward, usually boring. I grabbed the chart tablet from the nurse's station and headed down the hallway. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished linoleum. Somewhere down the hall, a patient was coughing. A medication cart rattled past, pushed by a pharmacy tech with earbuds in. St. Halsted was a teaching hospital, which meant it was always busy, always loud, always humming with the energy of 1,000 simultaneous emergencies and routines. I'd gotten used to it, the controlled chaos, the constant noise, the feeling that you were always running just to stay in place. My morning had started at 5:30 a.m. with pre-rounds checking on my patients before the attending arrived, reviewing overnight labs, making sure nothing catastrophic had happened while I slept. Then morning report at 7 a.m., where we discussed new admissions and challenging cases over stale coffee and bagels someone had brought from home. I'd presented a case, a 60-year-old man with unexplained anemia, and Dr. Ramirez, the attending, had grilled me for 10 minutes about my differential diagnosis. What about occult GI bleeding? Had I checked a fecal occult blood test? What about hemolysis? Had I looked at the peripheral smear? I'd answered each question, feeling sweat prick at the back of my neck, aware of the other residents watching. This was how you learned, through public interrogation, through being challenged, through having your thinking dissected in front of your peers. It was brutal, but it made you better. After morning report came rounds walking from room to room with the team, discussing each patient's progress, adjusting medications, ordering new tests. Then notes to write, orders to enter, families to call with updates. And now, at 10:47 a.m., a medication reconciliation issue in exam room 4. I pulled up the patient's chart on the tablet as I walked. Elizabeth Mitchell, 34 years old. Chief complaint, confusion, memory problems, fatigue. No significant past medical history. No chronic conditions. No hospitalizations. She'd been seen twice in the past 3 months by her primary care physician for similar complaints, but the notes were vague. Patient reports feeling foggy, denies drug use. Labs pending. I frowned. Foggy wasn't a diagnosis, and there were no follow-up notes about those pending labs. The second note, dated 2 weeks later, was even less helpful. Patient continues to report cognitive difficulties. Husband present, confirms symptoms. Started on antidepressant therapy. Follow up in 4 weeks. Something about the phrasing bothered me. Husband confirms symptoms. As if the patient's own report wasn't enough. As if she needed someone to vouch for her. I made a mental note to explore that further. I knocked twice on the door of exam room 4, then pushed it open. The woman sitting on the examination table was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes that looked like bruises. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, but several strands had escaped and hung limply around her face. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater that seemed to swallow her frame. Standing beside her was a man in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing business casual slacks, button-down shirt, leather shoes that looked expensive. His hand rested on her shoulder in what might have looked like a comforting gesture, but something about it made me uncomfortable. The pressure of his fingers, the way she seemed to lean slightly away from him, even as she remained still. "Mrs. Mitchell?" I said, extending my hand. "I'm Dr. Coleman." She looked at me with eyes that seemed to take a moment to focus, then reached out and shook my hand. Her grip was weak. Her palm was cold and slightly damp. "This is my husband, David," she said softly. Her voice had a hesitant quality, like she wasn't quite sure of the words. "Good morning," David said, his voice warm and confident. He didn't offer his hand, but he smiled the kind of smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. Perfect teeth, practiced warmth. "Thanks for seeing us on short notice, Doctor. Elizabeth's been having some issues lately, and we wanted to get them checked out." I nodded, setting the tablet down on the counter. "I understand you've been experiencing confusion and memory problems." Elizabeth nodded slowly. Yes. I keep forgetting things, little things mostly. Where I put my keys, what I was supposed to do that day. Sometimes I'll be in the middle of doing something, and I just lose track of what I was doing. How long has this been going on?" She looked at David as if seeking permission to answer. He squeezed her shoulder gently. "About 3 months, David said. Maybe 4. It started gradually, just occasional forgetfulness, but it's gotten worse. Yesterday, she forgot our anniversary. We've been married for 8 years. "I'm sorry," Elizabeth whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know what's wrong with me." I pulled up a stool and sat down, keeping my voice gentle. "It's okay. We're going to figure this out. Can you tell me about your typical day? What medications are you taking? Any recent changes in your routine?" Elizabeth opened her mouth to speak, but David cut in. "She's on a few things: antidepressants, anxiety medication. Her primary care doctor prescribed them a few months ago when this all started. I've got the list right here." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through it, then showed me a note. I copied down the medications. Sertraline 100 mg daily, lorazepam 2 mg as needed, zolpidem 10 mg at bedtime. Standard prescriptions for depression, anxiety, and insomnia. Nothing immediately concerning, but the doses were on the higher end. Lorazepam 2 mg as needed. That was a substantial dose. Combined with zolpidem for sleep, the sedating effects would be significant. "Are you taking these as prescribed?" I asked Elizabeth. She nodded. "David makes sure I take them. I've been forgetting lately, so he's been helping me." Something about that phrasing bothered me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it was the passivity of it. David makes sure I take them, as if she had no agency in her own medication management. Or maybe it was the way she said, "helping me," like she was grateful to be controlled. "How many times a day do you take the lorazepam?" I asked. She looked confused. I'm not sure, David. 3 times a day," he said. "Morning, afternoon, evening. It helps keep her anxiety under control." My internal alarm bell started ringing. Lorazepam 3 times a day was 6 mg total, a very high dose for someone with no documented anxiety disorder. Combined with the antidepressant and the sleep medication, she'd be sedated most of the time. "And that's prescribed as needed, correct?" I said, looking at David. "Yes, but she needs it regularly. The anxiety is pretty severe." I turned to Elizabeth. "How would you describe your anxiety?" She blinked, as if trying to remember. It's hard to describe. I feel nervous, unsettled. David says I get agitated if I don't take the medication. Do you feel anxious right now? She thought about it. I don't think so. I feel tired mostly. I made a note on the tablet. Patient doesn't report significant anxiety symptoms, but is being medicated for it 3 times daily. Any other symptoms? Headaches? Vision changes? Numbness or tingling? She's been tired, David said, sleeping a lot. And sometimes she gets dizzy when she stands up too fast. I looked at Elizabeth. Is that accurate? She nodded again, that same slow, uncertain nod. I stood up and moved closer, pulling out my pen light. I'm going to do a quick neurological exam, okay? I checked her pupils equal, round, reactive to light. I had her follow my finger with her eyes smooth pursuit, no nystagmus. I tested her reflexes normal. I asked her to squeeze my hand's weak grip, but symmetric. Can you tell me what day it is? I asked. She hesitated. Tuesday? It's Thursday, David said gently. Remember? We talked about this in the car. A flash of something frustration, fear, crossed her face. Right, Thursday. I'm sorry. Do you know what month it is? March, she said, more confidently. It's December, I said softly. Her face crumpled. I don't understand, I thought. I could have sworn it was March. I made a note on the tablet. Disorientation to time was concerning. Combined with the memory problems and the cognitive fog, we were looking at something beyond simple stress or depression. But here's what was really bothering me. She was oriented to person and place. She knew who she was. She knew she was in a hospital, but not to time. That pattern was unusual. Most cognitive disorders affected all domains of orientation simultaneously, or they followed a predictable pattern. This was selective, specific, almost like someone wanted her to be just confused enough to doubt herself, but not so confused that she couldn't function at home. I'd like to run some tests, I said. Blood work, maybe an MRI. There are several things that could cause these symptoms: thyroid problems, vitamin deficiencies, early onset dementia, even certain infections. We need to rule them out. Of course, David said. Whatever she needs. We just want answers. Elizabeth looked at him, then at me. Will the tests hurt? The question was childlike, vulnerable. I shook my head. Just a blood draw. The MRI is painless, just loud. You'll be fine. I'll be with you the whole time, David said, squeezing her shoulder again. I watched the way she responded to his touch, a slight flinch, quickly suppressed. Most people would lean into comfort from a spouse. She pulled away from it, even as she tried to hide the reaction. Mrs. Mitchell, I said carefully, would you be more comfortable if I spoke with you privately? Sometimes it's easier to discuss symptoms without— No, David said quickly. Elizabeth prefers that I stay. She gets anxious when she's alone, right, honey? Elizabeth nodded. Yes, I need David here. But her eyes said something different. They said, please don't leave me alone with him. I made another note on my tablet, angling it so David couldn't see. Patient appears anxious in husband's presence. Possible coercion. Monitor. I ordered a comprehensive metabolic panel, complete blood count, thyroid function tests, vitamin B12 and folate levels, and an MRI of the brain. The blood draw went smoothly. Elizabeth barely flinched when the needle went in, and I scheduled the MRI for later that afternoon. We should have results in a day or two, I told them as they prepared to leave. In the meantime, make sure you're eating regularly, staying hydrated, and getting enough rest. We will, David said. He helped Elizabeth put on her coat, his movements gentle and attentive, the perfect concerned husband. Thank you, doctor. As they walked out, I watched them go. David had his arm around Elizabeth's waist, guiding her down the hallway like she might collapse without his support. Something about the whole encounter felt off, but I couldn't articulate what. Maybe it was the way Elizabeth kept looking at David before answering my questions. Maybe it was the way he spoke for her, finishing her sentences, filling in details. Maybe it was just the general sadness of watching a young woman struggle with cognitive decline. Or maybe it was the way she'd said, David, make sure I take them, like her medication regimen was something that happened to her rather than something she participated in. I went back to the nurse's station and pulled up Elizabeth's full medical record. I wanted to see those notes from her primary care physician. Wanted to understand how she'd gone from healthy to cognitively impaired in just 3 months. But when I opened the file, I found something strange. The notes from her PCP were there, the 2 visits I'd already seen. But there was a gap, a 3-week gap between the first visit and the second visit where there should have been follow-up labs. I clicked on the lab section. The orders were there, CBC, CMP, thyroid panel, but no results. The tests had never been run. Why would a doctor order labs for a patient with cognitive complaints and then not follow up? I made a note to call her PCP. Something wasn't adding up. The rest of my day was a blur of patients and paperwork. A diabetic with uncontrolled blood sugar. A woman with a pulmonary embolism. A man with cirrhosis who'd been admitted for ascites drainage. Medicine was like this. A constant stream of people in various states of illness, each one requiring attention, decisions, interventions. You moved from room to room, problem to problem, barely pausing to breathe. By 6 p.m., I was exhausted. My white coat felt heavy. My stethoscope left an impression on the back of my neck. I grabbed a cup of coffee from the break room and sat down to finish my notes. That's when my pager went off again. PT, from Elizabeth Mitchell, requesting to speak with you. Says it's urgent. I glanced at the clock. 6:17 p.m. Her MRI appointment had been at 4:30. What was she doing in the I headed downstairs, taking the stairs two at a time. The was moderately busy, a few patients in the waiting room, a couple of ambulances at the bay. I found Elizabeth in a semi-private examination area, sitting on the edge of a gurney with her arms wrapped around herself. She was alone. No David. Mrs. Mitchell, I said, approaching carefully. What's going on? Are you okay? She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen yesterday. Clarity. Sharp, focused clarity. My file, she said, her voice low and urgent. My medical file, it's gone. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? My file, my medical records. Someone took them from the records room. I asked to see them this morning. I wanted to know what medications I'd been prescribed, what tests I've had, and they said the file was checked out. Checked out to my husband. My stomach tightened. Okay, that's unusual, but not impossible. Family members can request records with proper authorization. I didn't authorize it, she said, her voice rising slightly. I never signed anything. And when I called David to ask him about it, he said he didn't know what I was talking about. He said I was confused again. He said I was having another episode. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the gurney. Dr. Coleman, I'm not confused right now. I'm not foggy. One feel more clear-headed than I have in months. And I need you to believe me when I say something is very, very wrong. I pulled up a stool and sat down, trying to process what she was saying. When did you start feeling clear-headed? This morning. I woke up and my head felt lighter, like someone had lifted a fog. I could think straight for the first time in weeks. She paused. David left early for work. He didn't give me my morning medications. And I started feeling better. The implication hung in the air between us. Are you suggesting your medications are causing your symptoms? I don't know, she said. Maybe, or maybe they're not the right medications, or maybe ... double quote, she trailed off, shaking her head. I sound crazy, I know I do. But my file is missing, and I didn't take my medications this morning, and now I can think clearly. That can't be a coincidence. I thought about the medications David had shown me on his phone. Sertraline, lorazepam 3 times daily, zolpidem at night, high doses, sedating combinations, and the missing lab results. The gaps in her medical record. Let me look into this, I said. The records department should have a log of who checked out your file and when. And we can review your medication history, see if there have been any recent changes or additions. Thank you, she said, and I saw relief flood her face. Thank you for listening. Of course. I stood up. Stay here, I'll be right back. But as I turned to leave, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was stronger than it had been yesterday, evidence, perhaps, that the sedating effects of the medications were wearing off. Dr. Coleman, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared. I'm scared of what he might do when he finds out I came here, when he finds out I didn't take the medications. Who? David? She nodded, tears filling her eyes. Something's wrong with him, or maybe something's wrong with me. I don't know anymore, but I need help, please. I sat back down, looking at her carefully. The fear in her eyes was real. Whatever was happening, whether it was medical, psychiatric, or something else, this woman was terrified. I'm going to help you, I said, but I need you to be honest with me. Has David ever hurt you, physically? She shook her head. No, never. He's never hit me or anything like that. What about emotionally? Has he ever threatened you? Controlled you? She hesitated. He's protective, sometimes too protective. He doesn't like me going out without him. He checks my phone. He tells me I'm too sick to work, too sick to see my friends. But he says it's because he loves me, because he's worried about me. Classic signs of coercive control, isolation, monitoring, using concern as a weapon. Mrs. Mitchell, I think you should stay here. Let me run some tests, figure out what's really going on with your health. And I think you should talk to a social worker about your home situation. David will be furious if I don't come home. You're an adult. You have the right to stay in the hospital if you feel unsafe at home. She looked torn, frightened, uncertain. I don't know. I don't know what's real anymore. Then let's find out together, I said. The medical records department was on the 3rd floor, a windowless room filled with filing cabinets and computer terminals. The woman at the desk, a middle-aged administrator named Carol, looked up when I entered. Dr. Coleman, she said, smiling. What can I do for you? I need to check on a file. Elizabeth Mitchell, MRN 847,362. My patient says it was checked out, but she didn't authorize it. Carol typed on her computer, her fingers clicking across the keyboard. After a moment, she frowned. That's strange. What? The file was checked out yesterday afternoon at 2:15 p.m., but there's no signature on the authorization form. And it was checked out to ... She squinted at the screen. To you. My blood went cold. To me? That's what it says. Checked out by Dr. M. Coleman for patient consultation. She looked up at me. But you didn't check it out? No, I've never been to this office. I access all my patient records electronically. Carol's frown deepened. Then someone used your name to check out this file. That's a serious HIPAA violation. An identity theft. Can you see who physically came in to pick it up? Security cameras. We don't have cameras in here. Budget cuts. She typed some more, but the file hasn't been returned, which means someone has it. And if it wasn't you ... I felt a prickle of unease crawl up my spine. Someone had stolen Elizabeth's medical file and forged my name to do it. The question was, who had access to my name, my credentials, my identity? A family member wouldn't have that information, but someone who'd been in the hospital, someone who'd seen my ID badge, someone who'd paid attention to how the system worked, ... David had been with Elizabeth at every appointment. He'd watched me interact with the electronic medical records. He'd seen me write notes, order tests, access files. He'd been gathering information, learning the system, finding vulnerabilities. Can you print me a copy of the checkout log? I asked. Sure. She clicked a few buttons, and the printer hummed to life. She handed me the paper. Dr. Coleman, if someone's impersonating you to access patient records, you need to report this to administration immediately. This is serious. This could affect your license. I will. Thank you. I walked out of the office staring at the log. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m., less than an hour after Elizabeth and David had left my exam room yesterday. He'd walked out of my office, driven straight to the records department, and used my name to steal his wife's medical file. Why? What was in that file that he didn't want her to see? Or more importantly, what was in that file that he didn't want me to see? I went back to the ER, but Elizabeth was gone. A nurse told me her husband had arrived about 15 minutes ago and taken her home. She'd seemed reluctant to leave, the nurse said, but he'd been insistent. Said she needed rest. Said she was having one of her episodes. The nurse, a young woman named Jenna with kind eyes, leaned closer. Dr. Coleman, I don't want to overstep, but something felt off about that interaction. She kept looking at you like she was waiting for you to come back. And when her husband arrived, she just ... shut down, like someone had flipped a switch. Did she say anything? Just that she needed to go home. But her body language ... double quotes. Jenna shook her head. I've been a nurse for 5 years. I've seen a lot of things. And that felt wrong. I felt a surge of frustration. I'd left Elizabeth alone for 20 minutes, and David had swooped in and taken her. Did he say where they were going? Home. He said she needed to take her medications and rest. Her medications. the ones that made her confused and compliant. I tried calling Elizabeth's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I stood in the middle of the A, holding my pager, feeling a growing sense of dread. Elizabeth had said she felt clear-headed when she didn't take her medications. Her medical file had been stolen, and now her husband had taken her home, where he could control what she took, what she knew, what she remembered. I needed to talk to someone. I needed advice. I found Dr. Patel in the ICU, reviewing a chart at the nurse's station. She was a sharp, no-nonsense attending in her early 40s, with a reputation for being brilliant and demanding in equal measure. She'd been my supervisor during my first year of residency, and she'd taught me more about clinical medicine than anyone else. "Dr. Patel," I said, "do you have a minute?" She looked up, noting my expression. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I explained the situation, Elizabeth's symptoms, her clarity when she skipped her medications, the missing file, the forged checkout log, her fear of her husband. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, thinking. "You think the husband is drugging her?" she said finally. "I don't know what I think, but something's not right. Do you have any proof?" "No, just instinct, and a lot of concerning details that don't add up." She nodded slowly. "Instinct is important, but it's not enough to act on. Not in a case like this. You need evidence." She paused. "What medications is she on?" I rattled off the list. She frowned. "That's a lot of sedating medications for someone with no documented psychiatric history. Sertraline alone is fine, but lorazepam 3 times daily? And zolpidem at night? That's a recipe for cognitive impairment. That combination would keep someone in a perpetual fog. Could they cause the symptoms she's been having? Absolutely. Benzodiazepines like lorazepam can cause confusion, memory problems, sedation, especially in combination with sleep aids. And if someone were giving her higher doses than prescribed, or adding other substances ... double quotes, she trailed off. You need to find out who prescribed these medications. And you need to get a comprehensive tox screen on her. See if there's anything else in her system that shouldn't be there. She left with her husband. I don't know if I can get her back in. Then you find a way, Dr. Patel said firmly. Because if your instinct is right, that woman is in danger. Real danger. She pulled up Elizabeth's chart on the computer, scrolling through the notes. Look at this. 2 visits to her PCP for cognitive symptoms. Labs ordered but never completed. No follow-up, no referrals. It's like someone deliberately avoided getting a proper workup. Why would her PCP do that? Maybe the PCP didn't. Maybe someone intercepted the lab orders, canceled them, made sure they never got done. She looked at me. "Coleman, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. I've seen a lot of things. And this has all the hallmarks of medical abuse, someone using the healthcare system to control and harm a patient. What do I do? First, you document everything. Every interaction, every concern, every red flag. Make a paper trail that can't be disputed. Second, you contact her primary care physician directly. Find out what really happened with those visits. Third, you try to get her back in here for a full evaluation tox screen, comprehensive labs, psychiatric consultation. And fourth, double quotes, she paused. Fourth, you prepare for the possibility that you might need to involve law enforcement. My stomach tightened. You think it's that serious? I think a woman told you she's scared of her husband, that she feels better when she doesn't take her medications, and that her medical file has been stolen. Yes, Coleman, it's that serious. I spent the next hour documenting everything. I created a detailed timeline. The first appointment, Elizabeth's symptoms, David's controlling behavior, the medications that didn't match her diagnosis, the missing labs, the stolen file. I wrote down every observation, every concern, every moment that had made my instincts scream that something was wrong. Then I called Elizabeth's primary care physician, Dr. Richard Moss. His office was affiliated with St. Halstead, but I'd never met him. The receptionist told me he was with patients, but could call me back. I left a message marked urgent. He called back 25 minutes later. "Dr. Coleman, this is Richard Moss. You had questions about Elizabeth Mitchell?" Yes, sir. I saw her yesterday for cognitive complaints. I'm looking at her medication list, and I'm concerned about the combination. Can you tell me when these were prescribed and why? There was a pause. Let me pull up her file. I heard typing. Another pause, longer this time. That's odd. What? According to my records, I only prescribed the sertraline 3 months ago when she came in complaining of low mood and anxiety. But I never prescribed lorazepam or zolpidem. I wouldn't. That combination is too sedating, especially without close monitoring. My heart was racing now. Are you sure? Positive. I document everything. And I'm looking at my notes right now. There's no mention of benzodiazepines or sleep aids. Could she have gotten them from another physician? Possibly, but she didn't tell me about seeing anyone else. And she should have. Drug interactions are serious, especially with psychiatric medications. Dr. Moss, did you order labs at her first appointment? Yes. CBC, CMP, thyroid panel. Standard workup for new onset psychiatric symptoms. Were they completed? Another pause. No, the patient never showed up for the blood draw. I called to follow up, and her husband said she decided against the tests. Said she was feeling better and didn't think they were necessary. Everything clicked into place. David had prevented Elizabeth from getting lab work that might have shown she didn't need psychiatric medications. Then he'd somehow obtained prescriptions for sedating drugs from other doctors, probably by taking her to multiple physicians and lying about her symptoms. He'd been systematically drugging her, keeping her confused and dependent, while avoiding any medical tests that might reveal the truth. Dr. Moss, I need to ask you something. Did Elizabeth seem cognitively impaired at her appointments with you? Not at the first one. She was a little down, a little anxious, but completely coherent. Normal cognitive function. That's why I was surprised when her husband called 2 weeks later, saying her memory problems were getting worse. Her husband called you? Yes, said Elizabeth was too confused to come to the phone. He wanted to know if the sertraline might be causing cognitive side effects. I told him it was unlikely. SSRIs don't typically cause memory problems. I suggested she come in for a follow-up, but he said she was too unwell to leave the house. And you didn't think that was concerning? I did, actually. I made a note to follow up, but then I got busy with other patients. And ... double quotes, he trailed off. Dr. Coleman, is Elizabeth okay? Should I be concerned? Yes, Dr. Moss. You should be very concerned. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about Elizabeth, about the way she'd looked at David before answering my questions, about the weak grip of her hand, about the clarity in her eyes when she'd told me something was wrong. And I kept thinking about David, about his perfect smile and his expensive shoes, and the way he'd squeezed Elizabeth's shoulder, not comforting, but controlling. My mind kept spinning through possibilities. Was he drugging her for financial gain? For control? Because he was abusive? Or was there something else, some darker motivation I couldn't see yet? At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I got up, made coffee, and started researching. I found articles about medical abuse in intimate partner relationships, about abusers who used medications to keep their victims compliant, about cases where husbands had slowly poisoned their wives, making them appear mentally ill so they could control their finances, their decisions, their lives. I found a case from Michigan where a man had been giving his wife sleeping pills and antipsychotics, telling doctors she was schizophrenic. She'd spent 2 years in a fog before a nurse practitioner noticed inconsistencies and ordered a talk screen. The husband was sentenced to 15 years for assault and attempted murder. I found another case from Texas where a woman's husband had been crushing benzodiazepines into her food, slowly increasing the dose until she was nearly catatonic. He'd been trying to get her declared incompetent so he could access her inheritance. The patterns were all the same: isolation, medication, confusion, control, and Elizabeth fit the pattern perfectly. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early and went straight to the pharmacy. I found the lead pharmacist, a woman named Karen Chun, reviewing inventory at her desk. "Karen, I need your help with something." She looked up. "Sure, Dr. Coleman. What's going on?" I have a patient on multiple benzodiazepines and a sleep aid, but her primary care doctor says he never prescribed them. Is there a way to track where those prescriptions came from? See if there's a pattern of doctor shopping? We can look up her prescription history in our system. Give me her name and date of birth. I wrote down Elizabeth's information. Karen typed into her computer, scrolling through screens. Okay, here she is. Sertraline 100 milligrams daily, prescribed by Dr. Richard Moss 3 months ago. That's been filled regularly through our pharmacy. She scrolled more. But I'm not seeing any lorazepam or zolpidem prescriptions in our system. If she's taking those, she must be filling them somewhere else. Can you check other pharmacies? Not directly from my terminal, but I can put in a request to the state prescription monitoring program. They track all controlled substances across pharmacies. It'll take a day or two to get the results back though. Please do that. Mark it as urgent. I will. She paused, studying my face. Dr. Coleman, is this patient okay? This sounds concerning. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And I have a bad feeling about what we're going to find. I tried calling Elizabeth again at lunchtime. Still straight to voicemail. I tried the home number listed in her chart. It rang 4 times, then went to an answering machine. David's voice on the recording. You've reached the Mitchell residence. We can't come to the phone right now. Please leave a message and we'll get back to you. The voice was friendly, professional. The voice of a normal person living a normal life. But I knew better now. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I made a decision I knew might cross professional boundaries. Might even cost me my residency if I was wrong. I was going to do a home visit. The Mitchell house was in a nice suburb about 20 minutes from St. Halstead, the kind of neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained lawns and houses that looked like they belonged in magazines. The kind of neighborhood where everyone smiled at their neighbors and nothing bad ever happened. Except bad things did happen. They happened behind closed doors, in houses that looked perfect from the outside. The Mitchell house was a 2-story colonial with gray siding and white trim. A BMW sat in the driveway, expensive newer model. The front lawn was immaculate, edged precisely, not a leaf out of place. I parked across the street and sat there for a moment, questioning my judgment. This was highly unusual. Doctors didn't just show up at patients' houses unannounced. It was unprofessional, possibly unethical, definitely a boundary violation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Elizabeth needed help, that every hour I waited was an hour she spent confused, drugged, trapped. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. The afternoon sun was warm on my back. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. A lawnmower hummed. Normal suburban sounds. Normal suburban life. I rang the doorbell. Waited. No answer. I rang again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I heard something. A faint sound from inside the house. Like furniture scraping across a floor. Like someone moving around but trying to be quiet. Elizabeth? I called through the door. It's Dr. Coleman. Are you okay? Silence. Then so quiet I almost missed it. Help. My heart started pounding. I tried the doorknob. Locked. Elizabeth, where are you? Can you open the door? Can't. Her voice was muffled, distant. Upstairs. Locked in. Jesus Christ. Elizabeth, I'm calling 911. No. Her voice was louder now, panicked. No police, please. He'll say I'm having an episode. He'll make them think I'm crazy. Please, just help me get out. I pulled out my phone, hovering over 911. Every instinct screamed to call for help. But Elizabeth was right. If the police came and David convinced them she was mentally ill, having delusions, they might not believe her, might not help her. I needed proof first. Evidence that she was being held against her will, that she was in danger. Which room? I called through the door. Upstairs. Second door on the right. There's a window, maybe you can, she broke off, and I heard what sounded like crying. I stepped back, looking at the house. The upstairs windows were all closed. One of them, second window from the right, had curtains drawn tightly. I could try to climb up, but I'd probably fall and break my neck. And even if I made it, breaking a window to enter someone's house was definitely illegal. Think, Marcus. Think. I walked around to the back of the house. A wooden privacy fence enclosed the backyard, but the gate was unlocked. I pushed through. The backyard was as immaculate as the front: manicured lawn, flower beds, a stone patio with expensive outdoor furniture. Glass sliding doors led into what looked like the kitchen. I tried the doors, also locked, but there was a window next to the doors, a small window, probably for the kitchen, and it was open, just a crack but open. I looked around. No neighbors in sight, no witnesses. I was about to commit breaking and entering, about to throw away my medical career, possibly, if I was wrong about this. But if I was right, a woman's life was at stake. I slid the window open wider, grabbed the sill, and pulled myself up. It was a tight fit. I'm not a small guy, but I managed to squeeze through, falling onto the kitchen floor in an undignified heap. I stood up, brushing myself off, and looked around. The kitchen was spotless. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a fruit bowl on the island with perfectly arranged apples and oranges that looked like they'd never been touched. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. "Elizabeth," I called softly. "It's Dr. Coleman. I'm in the house." "I'm coming upstairs." I moved through the kitchen into the living room. More perfection: leather furniture, expensive art on the walls, bookshelves arranged by color. It looked like a showroom, not a home where people actually lived. I climbed the stairs, my footsteps muffled by thick carpet. At the top of the stairs was a hallway with 4 doors, 2 on each side. Second door on the right. I approached it, tried the handle, locked. "Elizabeth, can you hear me?" "Yes." Her voice came from the other side, stronger now. "There's a key. David keeps it in the master bedroom, top drawer of his nightstand." I went to the first door on the right, the master bedroom. It was as immaculate as the rest of the house. King-sized bed with hospital corners, matching nightstands. No personal items visible anywhere. I opened the top drawer of the nightstand on the right side of the bed. Inside was a key, but that wasn't what made my blood run cold. Also in the drawer were medication bottles, dozens of them, all with Elizabeth's name, all from different pharmacies, all prescribed by different doctors. Lorazepam, alprazolam, clonazepam, zolpidem, temazepam, trazodone. 6 different sedating medications. Some of them duplicate drugs, 3 different benzodiazepines that all did essentially the same thing. This wasn't medical treatment. This was chemical restraint. I grabbed the key and ran back to Elizabeth's door. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. The room on the other side was small, dim, with only a single bed and a dresser. No computer, no TV, no books, nothing to do except sleep. Elizabeth was sitting on the bed, her arms wrapped around herself. When she saw me, she started crying. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing me." I crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "No, just scared. He locked me in this morning after I refused to take the pills. He said I was being difficult. He said he'd let me out when I was ready to cooperate." She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Dr. Coleman, he's been drugging me for months. I found the bottles in his nightstand last week. That's when I realized, that's when I knew it wasn't just in my head. I wasn't going crazy. He was making me crazy. I know. I found the bottles too. Elizabeth, we need to get you out of here, right now, before he comes back. He'll be home soon. He always comes home around 6 to make sure I take my evening medications." I checked my watch. 5:47 p.m. We had 13 minutes. "Can you walk?" I asked Elizabeth. She nodded, standing up. She was steadier on her feet than she'd been in my exam room 2 days ago. The medications were clearing her system, giving her back control of her body and mind. "We're going to walk out the front door, get in my car, and drive straight to the hospital. I'm going to get you checked in, run a full talk screen, and we're going to document everything. Okay? Okay." Her voice was shaky but determined. We went downstairs. I was reaching for the front door when I heard it. A car in the driveway, an engine shutting off. David was home. "Back door," I said, grabbing Elizabeth's hand. We ran through the living room toward the kitchen, but we were too late. I heard the front door open, heard footsteps in the foyer. "Elizabeth, David's voice, pleasant, warm. Honey, I'm home. Did you have a good day? Elizabeth froze, her hand gripping mine so hard it hurt. Stay behind me, I whispered. David appeared in the kitchen doorway. When he saw us, his expression shifted: confusion, then understanding, then something cold and hard. Dr. Coleman, he said, his voice still pleasant but with an edge now. This is unexpected. I didn't realize we had an appointment. We don't, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm taking Mrs. Mitchell to the hospital. She needs medical evaluation. I don't think so. He stepped further into the kitchen, blocking the path to the back door. My wife is fine. She's just confused. Having another episode. Aren't you, honey? Elizabeth didn't answer. She was shaking, pressed against my back. Mr. Mitchell, I know what you've been doing. I found the medications in your nightstand. I know you've been drugging your wife, keeping her sedated, keeping her under your control. David's pleasant mask finally cracked. His expression went cold, calculating. You don't know anything. You're a second-year resident who's overstepped his bounds and broken into my house. Who do you think the police will believe, a respected businessman or a resident who violated HIPAA, committed breaking and entering, and made wild accusations without evidence? He was right. Legally, I was in the wrong. I'd broken into his house. I'd entered without permission. Even if I could prove he was drugging Elizabeth, I'd committed crimes to discover it, but I didn't care. The police can sort it out, I said. Elizabeth, call 911. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. David moved faster than I expected. He lunged forward, grabbing for the phone. I stepped between them, and he shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward, hitting the kitchen counter. Don't touch her, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house, David said, or I'll call the police myself. Report you for breaking and entering, for harassment, for violating doctor-patient confidentiality. Do it, I said. Call them. I'll wait right here. And when they arrive, we can all take a trip to the hospital together. We can run a talk screen on Elizabeth. See what's really in her system. See how many medications she's been taking without her knowledge or consent. David's jaw clenched. You have no proof of anything. I have the medications from your nightstand. I have testimony from Elizabeth's primary care physician that he never prescribed most of what she's taking. I have records showing you checked out her medical file using my name. I have documentation of every concerning interaction we've had. I pulled out my phone. And I have a recording of this entire conversation. I was bluffing. I hadn't recorded anything. But he didn't know that. David stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed a cold, humorless sound. Fine, he said. Take her. See how long she lasts without someone taking care of her. She's pathetic, weak. She needs me. In a week, she'd be begging to come back. No, Elizabeth said quietly from behind me. I won't. David's expression twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought he might attack us both. But then he stepped aside, gesturing toward the back door. Get out, he said. We didn't need to be told twice. The prescription monitoring report came back the next morning. Karen from the pharmacy called me to her office, her face grim. You were right to be concerned, she said, pulling up the report on her computer. I leaned over her shoulder, reading the data. Elizabeth Mitchell had active prescriptions for 6 different controlled substances from 6 different doctors. Lorazepam 2 milligrams, Dr. James Hartley, Riverside Medical Clinic. Alprazolam 1 milligram, Dr. Susan Park, Northside Family Practice. Clonazepam 0.5 milligrams, Dr. Michael Torres. Eastwood Internal Medicine, Zolpidem 10 milligrams, Dr. Patricia Lee. Westside Healthcare, Temazepam 15 milligrams, Dr. Robert Chun. Southgate Medical, Trizodone 100 milligrams, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Central City Clinic. 6 different sedating medications, 3 benzodiazepines that did essentially the same thing, 2 sleep aids, an antidepressant with sedating properties. This is classic doctor shopping, Karen said. Multiple physicians, multiple pharmacies, overlapping prescriptions. The sedating effects would be compounded exponentially if she was taking all of these ... She shook her head. It's a miracle she's alive. Can you see who picked up the prescriptions? She clicked through screens. They were all picked up at different pharmacies over the past 3 months. But the person who picked them up had to show ID each time. She paused, highlighting a field. The name on the ID for all 6 prescriptions was David Mitchell. My hands clenched into fists. Her husband picked up every single prescription. Looks like it. And Dr. Coleman? There's more. She clicked to another screen. I pulled the prescribing history. Look at the dates these were written. I scanned the list. The prescriptions had been written within days of each other, all in the same 2-week period 3 months ago. He took her to 6 different doctors in 2 weeks, I said slowly. Probably told each one a different story, got them to prescribe sedating medications, then picked them all up himself, and started giving them to her in combination, Karen finished. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate, systematic drugging. This was attempted murder. Elizabeth was admitted to the medical floor for observation and detoxification. The tox screen showed dangerously high levels of multiple benzodiazepines in her system, enough to keep someone heavily sedated 24/7. Dr. Patel supervised her care personally. We're going to slowly taper her off the medications, she explained to Elizabeth. Stopping cold turkey could cause seizures or other withdrawal symptoms. It'll take about a week, maybe longer, to clear everything from your system. And then, Elizabeth asked, and then you'll feel like yourself again. Your real self. The person you were before all this started. Elizabeth started crying. Not from fear this time, but from relief. I called the police from the hospital. 2 detectives arrived within an hour. A woman named Detective Sarah Martinez and her partner, Detective James Wong. I showed them everything. The prescription monitoring report. The bottles from David's nightstand that I'd taken as evidence. My documentation of every interaction. Elizabeth's testimony. This is substantial, Detective Martinez said, reviewing the documents. Medical abuse, fraud, identity theft, false imprisonment. We'll need to interview Mrs. Mitchell formally, get a full statement. And we'll need to execute a search warrant on the Mitchell residence. See what else we can find. What about the fact that I broke into the house? I asked. You entered through an unlocked window in response to a call for help from someone you believed was in danger, Detective Wong said. That's not breaking and entering. That's responding to an emergency. You're a mandatory reporter. You had an obligation to help. Will he be arrested? As soon as we finish the investigation, probably within 24 hours. The search of the Mitchell house uncovered even more evidence. A journal where David had documented every medication he'd given Elizabeth, every doctor's visit, every symptom he'd observed. Notes about how the drugs were affecting her, how he could increase the doses to keep her more compliant. Financial documents showing that David had been slowly transferring money from Elizabeth's accounts into his own. Forged signatures on documents he'd created to give himself power of attorney. Life insurance policies where he was the sole beneficiary, policies Elizabeth had never agreed to. And most damning, internet search history from David's computer. Searches about benzodiazepine overdose, about how to make someone appear mentally ill, about inheritance laws and spousal rights. He'd been planning this for months, maybe years. The detectives also uncovered David's history. A previous wife who died under suspicious circumstances 10 years ago ruled an accidental overdose of sleeping pills. A girlfriend before that who'd suffered a mental breakdown and been institutionalized, only to recover completely after they broke up. David Mitchell was a predator. He targeted women, isolated them, drugged them, and stole from them. Elizabeth was just his latest victim, but unlike the others, she'd survived. David was arrested the next evening. He was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, fraud, identity theft, and a dozen other crimes. The district attorney said he'd be seeking the maximum sentence, possibly life in prison. The story made local news. "Local man arrested for drugging wife," ran the headline. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, trying to get interviews. I declined. This wasn't my story to tell. It was Elizabeth's, and she told it beautifully. In a press conference organized by her lawyer, Elizabeth spoke clearly and confidently about what had happened to her, about how David had isolated her from her friends and family, about how he'd convinced her she was mentally ill, that she needed him, that she couldn't trust her own mind, about how a doctor had listened when she said something was wrong. "Dr. Coleman saved my life," she said, looking directly into the cameras. "He believed me when everyone else thought I was confused. He investigated when it would have been easier to dismiss my concerns. He put his career at risk to help me. That's what doctors should do. That's what it means to truly care for a patient." The hospital conducted a review of my actions in the Mitchell case. Dr. Sullivan, the chief of medicine, called me into his office 1 week after David's arrest. I sat in the chair across from his desk, prepared for the worst, prepared to hear that I'd violated patient privacy, crossed professional boundaries, committed ethical violations that would end my residency. Instead, he said, "Dr. Coleman, the review board has concluded that your actions in the Mitchell case, while unorthodox, were appropriate given the circumstances. Your documentation was thorough, your clinical judgment was sound, and your intervention likely saved Mrs. Mitchell's life." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you, sir. However," he continued, "we are implementing new protocols based on this case. Better systems for tracking prescription patterns across providers. Mandatory training for all residents and attendings on recognizing signs of intimate partner violence and medical coercion. Improved security for medical records to prevent unauthorized access." "That's good," I said. "It is. And Dr. Coleman?" He leaned forward, his expression serious. "What you did took courage. You trusted your instincts when it would have been easier to doubt yourself. You advocated for a patient who couldn't advocate for herself. That's the kind of doctor we need. That's the kind of doctor we want at St. Halsted." He stood up, extended his hand. I shook it. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said. "Trust yourself, question everything, and never stop fighting for your patients." Elizabeth was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks after her admission. The medications had cleared from her system, and she was herself again, sharp, articulate, fully present. "It's like waking up from a long nightmare," she told me on her last day. "I can think clearly. I can remember things. I feel like me again. What are you going to do now?" I asked. "First, I'm going to testify at David's trial. Make sure he never does this to anyone else." She paused. "And then I'm going back to school. I was in nursing school before I met David. He convinced me to drop out, said I should focus on supporting his career. But I loved it. I loved helping people. I want to finish. You'll be a great nurse. Maybe," she smiled. "Or maybe I'll go further. Maybe I'll become a doctor. Like you. The field needs people like you. People who understand what it's like to be vulnerable, to need help, to not be believed. Will you write me a recommendation letter when the time comes?" I'd be honored. 6 months later, I was reviewing charts in the residence lounge when I got a text from Elizabeth. "First day of nursing school. Wish me luck." I smiled and texted back, "You don't need luck. You've got this." Her response came immediately. "Thank you for everything, Dr. Coleman, for seeing me, for believing me, for saving my life." I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling that familiar warmth in my chest. This was why I became a doctor, not just to treat diseases or prescribe medications, but to see people really see them, to listen when they say something's wrong, to believe them when everyone else thinks they're crazy, to fight for them when they can't fight for themselves. It's been a year since Elizabeth Mitchell walked into my exam room complaining of confusion and memory problems. A year since I found that gym bag in the hospital parking lot and discovered the truth about what her husband had been doing to her. David Mitchell pled guilty to attempted murder, fraud, and multiple other charges. He's serving a 25-year sentence with no possibility of parole. The investigation into his first wife's death was reopened, and he's facing additional charges in that case. Elizabeth is thriving. She finished her first year of nursing school at the top of her class. She volunteers at a shelter for domestic violence survivors, sharing her story, helping other women recognize the signs of abuse. She calls me sometimes, not as a patient, but as a friend. We meet for coffee occasionally, talk about medicine and life, and the strange path that brought us together. "You know what's funny?" she said at our last meeting. "When this all started, I thought I was going crazy. I thought there was something wrong with me. But the whole time, I was the sane one. I was the one seeing clearly. It was everyone around me who was being manipulated. You trusted your instincts, I said, even when it would have been easier to accept the narrative David was creating. I almost didn't. I almost let him convince me I was losing my mind. She looked at me. That's why what you did mattered so much. You validated my reality. You told me I wasn't crazy. That might sound simple, but it literally saved my life. The hospital implemented sweeping changes based on the Mitchell case. Every patient admitted with cognitive symptoms now gets a comprehensive tox screen automatically. We have better systems for tracking prescription patterns across providers' red flags. Go up immediately if someone is seeing multiple doctors for controlled substances. We have mandatory training twice a year on recognizing signs of intimate partner violence, medical coercion, and abuse. We have protocols for how to interview patients privately, away from potentially controlling family members. We have a code word system where patients can signal to staff that they need help without alerting an abuser. If a patient uses certain phrases, "I'd like to discuss my blue folder," or "Can we talk about the weather in March?" staff know to get them away from their companions and assess for danger. These systems won't catch every case. Abusers are clever, manipulative, always finding new ways to exploit their victims. But they'll catch some. They'll save some lives. And that's what matters. As for me, I'm finishing my second year of residency. I'm applying for cardiology fellowships, thinking about what comes next, where I want my career to go. The doubts are still there. They always will be. Medicine is full of uncertainty, full of moments where you have to make decisions with incomplete information, where you have to trust your judgment, even when you're not sure. But I've learned something important. Those instincts matter. That internal voice that says, something's not right, matters. The feeling in your gut when a patient's story doesn't add up matters. You have to listen to it. You have to investigate, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's difficult, even when it means questioning authority or crossing boundaries or risking being wrong. Because sometimes that voice is the difference between life and death. Sometimes listening to that voice is what separates a good doctor from a great one. Last week, I was presenting a case at Morning Report, a woman with unexplained fatigue and cognitive symptoms. The attending asked me what my differential diagnosis was. I rattled off the usual suspects: thyroid dysfunction, vitamin deficiencies, sleep apnea, depression. And, the attending prompted, I hesitated, and ... I want to make sure we're getting an accurate medication history. I want to interview the patient privately, without family members present. I want to run a tox screen. The attending nodded. Why? Because something feels off. Her husband is very involved in her care, maybe too involved. He answers questions for her. He manages all her medications. And she seems ... diminished, like she's not fully present. So you're concerned about what? Medical coercion, possible abuse. The room went quiet. A few residents shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the kind of thing we usually talked about in Morning Report. But the attending smiled. Good instincts, Dr. Coleman. Always trust your gut. Medicine isn't just about lab values and imaging studies. It's about seeing the whole picture, the patient in context, the relationships that might be helping or harming. He turned to the rest of the room. Dr. Coleman's approach here is exemplary. When something doesn't feel right, you investigate. You ask questions. You protect your patients. That's what we do. The case turned out to be hypothyroidism, nothing sinister. But the attending pulled me aside afterward. I know about the Mitchell case, he said. What you did took guts. You put your career on the line for a patient. Not many residents would do that. I just did what seemed right. That's the point. You trusted yourself. In a field where we're constantly being told to defer to authority, to follow protocols, to not make wave, you made waves. You questioned. You investigated. He paused. That's the kind of doctor who changes things, who saves lives in ways that go beyond prescriptions and procedures. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Keep doing it, he said. Keep questioning. Keep trusting yourself. The world needs more doctors like you. I think about Elizabeth often, about the woman she was when I first met her, confused, frightened, trapped in a fog created by someone who claimed to love her, and about the woman she is now, strong, clear-minded, whole, using her experience to help others. I think about that moment in the hospital parking lot, when I opened David's gym bag and saw those annotated files, when everything clicked into place, when I realized that my instincts had been right all along. That moment changed me, made me more confident in my judgment, more willing to trust that inner voice that says something's wrong. But it also made me more aware of how easy it is to miss abuse, how abusers hide in plain sight, wearing expensive clothes and pleasant smiles, playing the role of concerned spouse or devoted partner, how victims can seem fine on the surface, going to work, managing households, smiling at doctors while suffering in silence, how easy it is to dismiss someone's concerns as anxiety or confusion or mental illness, when the truth is much darker. I'm writing this at the end of a long shift. It's 11 p.m. and the hospital is quiet, that strange, suspended quiet of late night in a place that never truly sleeps. I'm sitting in the residence lounge, drinking bad coffee, thinking about the patients I saw today, the lives I touched, the decisions I made. Did I order the right tests? Did I miss anything? Did I listen carefully enough? These questions will always be there. That's the nature of medicine. You do your best with the information you have, and you hope it's enough. But I know now that the most important thing I can do, more important than ordering tests or prescribing medications, is to listen. Really listen. To what patients say and what they don't say. To the stories behind the symptoms. To the context of their lives. To trust my instincts when something feels wrong. To believe patients when they say they need help. To fight for them when they can't fight for themselves. That's what medicine is. That's what it should be. And that's the kind of doctor I want to be. I gather my things and head out of the hospital. The December air is cold, biting. The parking lot is nearly empty at this hour, just a few cars scattered across the asphalt, belonging to the skeleton crew that keeps the hospital running through the night. I get in my car and sit there for a moment, my breath fogging in the cold air, thinking about everything that's happened this year. About Elizabeth, about David, about the system that almost failed to protect her, about the responsibility we have as physicians, not just to treat bodies, but to protect lives, not just to prescribe medications, but to see the whole person, the whole situation, to be advocates, protectors, witnesses. My phone buzzes. A text from Elizabeth. Just got my grades for first semester, 4.0 GPA. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I smile and text back. I always knew you could do it. Proud of you. I start the car and drive home, feeling the familiar weight of my stethoscope in the bag beside me. Not a burden, a promise. A promise to see my patients, all of them, in all their complexity. A promise to listen when they say something's wrong. A promise to fight for them, even when it's hard, even when it's risky, even when it means standing alone. Because that's what being a doctor means. Not just healing diseases, but protecting lives. Not just following protocols, but trusting your instincts. Not just treating symptoms, but seeing the truth, even when the truth is hidden, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's dangerous to uncover. We have to look, we have to question, we have to believe. That's what I learned from Elizabeth Mitchell, and I'll carry that lesson with me for the rest of my career, for the rest of my life.